There we go. So welcome to the Professional Development Lunch Talk. This week, we're welcoming back several GMU alumni who are here to talk to us about their pathways after undergrad and what careers can look like outside of the standard grad school or professor archetype. If you have any questions, feel free to either unmute yourself or send them through the chat or the anonymous question form, which I'm going to link in there right now. That should take you to it. All right, and we want to acknowledge this may be a particularly stressful week for many of our department members. So as always, this talk is going to be recorded for asynchronous viewing, and we'll send out a link for the recording to the listservs once we get it, and it'll be posted to the Spectrum website. So we've got a really good group of people here. So I'm gonna actually let them start off by introducing themselves, and then we'll get started with some pre-submitted questions. So if you wanna go ahead and introduce yourselves and give a quick description of what your current job is, Prabal, also your job just after undergrad, since you're a different case here, and your undergrad experience, anything else that's relevant to you. So I don't know, Andrew, do you want to start?
Sure, I can go. I'm Andrew Hornstra. I graduated in 2018, did math and physics double major, and I'm currently at Capital One as a senior data analyst working in bank fraud right now, and I was in anti-money laundering. So kind of non-traditional data analysis at Capital One.
Okay. Clarissa, do you want to go?
Hi, I'm Clarissa. I graduated in May 2019 with a physics bachelor's and astronomy minor. And right now I work at Anthem Insurance as a data analyst. So I just watch all of their data loads and help them process claims on the back end.
Tina?
Hey, I'm Tina. I graduated back in 2014 with a degree in physics and a minor in astronomy, so similar. I'm currently located in New York. I'm working as a team lead for an engineering team at Bloomberg LP. We essentially, in a nutshell, just maintain a data set. Loan level data, it drives the functionality on the Bloomberg terminal related to mortgage-backed securities. So if you're familiar with the movie The Big Short, that's our bread and butter. Yeah, happy to be here.
Okay. Prabal?
Hi, everyone. I'm Prabal Saxena. I graduated in 2015 with a PhD in computational science and physics, astronomy. It was part of the SPACS department, which I think is now physics and astronomy. I currently work as a postdoc at NASA Goddard UMD Crest. I work mostly on planetary science, but a lot of exoplanets. Before I came to George Mason, I worked for a consultant, worked on random farms, and played in shitty bands. So that was my thing before.
Okay. So we're just going to get started with some of the questions that we have. So first, what's a typical day in your job look like? And anyone just jump in and answer when you have.
I guess I could go ahead. So this is probably the closest to if you're doing grad work or something like that. Usually you end up doing a lot of writing, some type of data analysis, which sounds like it's a common thread across all these occupations. The surprising thing is there's a lot more interaction with people and trying to just get basic requirements and trying to communicate things and kind of work together in teams, which I also imagine might be kind of universal.
I can echo that. In my previous job in AML, it was a lot of anti-money laundering, a lot of acronyms. It was a lot of writing Python and SQL, and currently that's changed almost entirely into coordinating with people, getting requirements for what their business purpose is, and it really is a lot of communication overhead. So a lot more emails than code recently, but that's to be expected.
My job is a good combination of both of those. So we use SQL and then a different program called Informatica to monitor data coming into all the servers. But since data is finicky and really slow, sometimes we have a lot of communication as well, because a lot of the business side of everything needs things up by a certain time. So a lot of our stuff is also communicating if there are failures or lags in the jobs that we have to watch.
Yeah, so my day-to-day is a lot different now than it used to be when I was just an individual contributor. It was definitely lots of problem solving on my own and doing independent work. We also use primarily Python as our programming language of choice, but my work is probably less data analysis and more what I would consider like janitorial work, because we're maintaining a production quality data set, and no one out in the industry is really like paid to produce clean data, at least when you're talking about like loan servicers disclosing that information. So a lot of our work is trying to clean up very messy consistency issues and trying to scale that so that we can actually maintain a good turnaround time for producing that data.
I think that might be the most important job in data analysis. And thank you for doing that. It makes my life easier when we have people like that.
You're welcome.
All right. And then how long did it take you to get a job? Were there any resources particularly helpful for you, either at GMU or externally? And when and where do you recommend students start looking?
I'll start with the last one. I'd recommend starting to look early in your senior year, not too late. I wouldn't do what I did and wait until April. It took me several months, and some companies have timed hirings where they onboard people in batches. So it's a good idea to start kind of early. I did use the George Mason handshake, I think it's called, but didn't get much out of that personally.
For me, I wasn't really sure where I was going to be living, so I didn't even start until after I graduated. So wouldn't recommend, but it took, I think I got my job in October after I graduated, late September, early October. And before that, I was working like as a tutor for part-time. Yeah, the way I got my job, I just started looking up related fields. Like I knew that I had some computer background from the physics classes, so I started looking into like systems and data analysts. And I found a company that actually recruits for other companies. So I'm technically a contractor with Anthem through this other company. But those are usually really great places to start for entry-level jobs, because that's usually exactly what they're looking for. Yeah, so they did like a pre-screening on me and then sent me to Anthem, where I was interviewed by my team, and then my team extended an offer. So I personally like recommend trying to find places like that, because they do a really good job with connecting, especially because places like Anthem and some places don't like to hire outside of those companies and also outside of their own company. So it kind of can help you get in those situations.
I think my experience was a little bit different because I didn't plan to apply to jobs immediately after graduating. I kind of needed to take some time, figure out what I wanted to do with my degree, because I had all throughout my senior year definitely planned on staying in academia and going to grad school. And it was towards the very end that I kind of had a change of heart. And so I was like, I need to pause, think about it. And I ended up deciding to move to New York before I knew what I was going to do, because I was like, you can either change your job or change your location. These are like major life decisions. And so I chose to move. And then after I was settled in, I started looking for jobs. And I think that helped me because I was using mostly like the typical resources, Indeed, LinkedIn, looking for engineering positions that would hire people from a physics background. But I think that being in the location where I was looking for a job helped me. If like I'd been still living in Virginia applying to those jobs, I think I would have maybe had fewer interviews because it was much easier for me to get in the door if they knew that I was local. But that may or may not be true at this point.
So for me, I think I'd applied for like a bunch of fellowships and positions and things like that during like kind of the fall before I wanted to start. And I remember rushing, I'm sure Mike can tell you about this, rushing to get my defense done before my fellowship started so that I could be like, so I could actually get paid. But I think the big thing related to this, because for academia, it is kind of idiosyncratic in terms of the paths you might end up taking, is that I know this is not necessarily advice people want to hear, But when you're working on like tests and all these other things, you have to also cut aside some time and multitask. You have to take that time to put in applications, because, and even if it's just like an hour on one day being like, I'm gonna write this part of a cover letter or something like that, it's incredibly valuable to chip away at those things, because otherwise it becomes really daunting to then be like, hey, I have this big thing I have to kind of knock out.
Tina, can you talk a little bit more about the reasons why you decided not to go into academia?
Definitely. I think it came down to kind of what I felt like I would be most fulfilled doing. I very much enjoyed studying physics and being like completely kind of surrounded by it. I didn't take really any breaks. I changed my major after 2 years, and then I spent 3 years taking lots of credits, trying to catch up and make up for things that I'd missed because I had been on a track previously to get a Bachelor of Arts. And I spent all my summers either like taking classes or researching. So it was 3 years of being completely absorbed in it. And I ended up feeling like I wanted to go out and be part of industry rather than kind of staying in this like safe space that I enjoyed, because as much as I loved being in school, I definitely didn't feel like I was going to be interacting with people that much, maybe a small group of people, but I wanted to work on something where I felt like I could feel the direct impact of what I was working on. And so it's definitely a personal choice. And I think it comes from the fact that I've always been very hands-on with people. I spent 7 or 8 years working in retail customer service while I was in high school and all throughout college. And I think that realizing that I would be quitting that entirely to spend my entire time doing research, I wasn't willing to completely sacrifice that. So I decided that going out and taking those skills and applying them in industry was something that felt more like a better fit for me. Yeah.
Thank you for your perspective. Does anyone else have something about I was thinking about going to grad school, but decided to go into industry? Any other perspective they would like to share?
That was another reason I was so late in starting job applications, but I completely forgot until Tina said it. But I was thinking of doing grad school for a pretty good portion of it. And I remember just like around April, I think, like sometime before finals, I was kind of sitting there and so burned out from trying to keep up and trying to make sure that like I was managing my time well, that thinking about going to school the next semester was so just I dreaded the idea of it. And I was like, I love physics, like I love astronomy, I love being able to do this, but I need to take some time, and I need to make sure that I actually rest and recharge for a bit and then go back into school. So yeah, so it kind of came down to that for me, where I was just like, because I'd also done summer classes for like the last like 2 or 3 years, so I hadn't had a break from academia in a while. And so I was like, one summer is not going to be enough for me. I need more time to just get back on track and actually like re-realize the passion that I had for physics before going back in. So yeah, so I ended up taking a break. Now I'm in a graduate program at VCU in Richmond, but I really enjoyed having that year just to figure out what life could be like outside of academia as well. Because I realized I don't know anything outside of school, and I was curious and I wanted to learn what else was out there, what it was like to be outside of academia and actually, and have a normal job and, salary and that kind of thing, and just see what that was like, what the pressures of the real world were like compared to the pressures of school, and go from there. And I actually really enjoyed taking that year. I felt really great going into grad school after that. So, yeah.
Awesome. That actually brings us to another question. So you just mentioned that you went back to grad school after a year, and Prabal, I know you took some time off before going to grad school where you did a bunch of different things. I guess question one, for those of you that did, what made you decide to go back? And then also for those of you who have not decided to go back to grad school or are not sure if they want to, do you have any intention of going back? And if so, does your company provide assistance for that?
Yeah, so I think I have a kind of weird path. So I did my physics and math degree at Columbia, and after I graduated, I remember I I knew I liked astronomy and physics, but I also knew I liked a lot of other things. So I figured if I don't go and do those things now, it's just going to be harder to once you get into some other type of track. There's just an inertia of what you end up being in, and kind of the opportunities that are available. So I actually did a couple of different things before I worked for a consultant for like a year and a half. I boxed a little, which is why I have fewer brain cells than I should. And I also worked on farms in a couple of different places, which is something I enjoy anyway. And I like working in the outdoors. I think it was really important because it sounds like a really key issue is burnout. And I think that's kind of true just over time in just about anything, especially if you're doing problem sets and all these other intense, like, really just down in the weeds, like 15 hours on some stupid transform you need to figure out type thing. So I think in those cases, being able to be like, hey, there are other things in life that I enjoy that, kind of take the edge off, that remind me why I like what I do. That was really important to me, because I was like, hey, I'm working on this stuff and I'm still reading astronomy papers. So, maybe I should give this a shot. So.
Yeah, for me it was, I always had the intention of going back to school because I know long term it's what I want to do. I just knew that I needed that break, and also I wanted to get the chance to explore some of the areas that we had classes in but we didn't get to go super in depth in. And so, especially when the black hole photo came out, and how so much of that wasn't just physics, but it was a lot of computer programming. I just kind of had this moment of like, so much of every field is going more and more towards computer programming. So I was like, I really want to get more into that. I want to find out more applications of that. And so like now in my job, I get to use SQL, and like my first month, I became like really close friends with some of the developers on different teams, and they started teaching me so much. And I mean, honestly, it was really great because I felt like I was still learning, but in such a different way from in school. Like I was learning without the pressure of a grade, but like, it kind of reminded me that like learning a new thing can be fun without like so much pressure around it. And yeah, so I really enjoyed it. Now, like I mean, coding obviously always has the frustrations like along with it, but I really love doing it, and I felt a lot more confident going back to grad school now that I had this extra skill that was more developed than it would have been had I just gone straight into my master's. So yeah, like Prabal said, a lot of exploring those different things and getting to see the real world applications that come from those. And then just, like I said, I always just wanted to go back to school because I really love physics and love astronomy. So I didn't want to be separated from it for too long.
Yeah, I definitely keep it on like my list of to-do things going back to school. I think part of the reason I felt more comfortable walking away from applying to grad school at the time that I did was that I knew it would still be an option later. I think one of you mentioned that sometimes if you like don't take the opportunity sooner, those doors end up closing. And so I wanted to make sure I like went out and took the opportunity to work in industry before I felt like I was too far from it. My company does offer assistance for going to grad school, but it would have to be something that's more related to what I'm actually doing. So I have contemplated going and getting a master's degree in computer science or doing one of those graduate programs because they would provide assistance on that. But if I were to go back and try to get my physics PhD, I'd probably be on my own. But I kind of keep that as a plan for me in the long term. Like when I've had my fun, like my retirement plan is probably to go to school and just like enjoy myself learning.
We also provide assistance for going back to grad school, or at least it's been part of the employment contract that I have. I am still looking at going back. It's not in my immediate future, but it's definitely something that I want to head back to. It's something I really don't want to stay away from for too long, as has been said a little earlier. But it's been very valuable to see, in particular, the different emphasis that you see in a lot of industries over what was emphasized in education, like when I was actually in undergrad. It was as if it's in the past. It's a very nice perspective to get that kind of different view.
Thank you. I'm sure that's good information for people who are not sure what's happening with COVID and grad school and everything with that. I know that's on a lot of people's minds. So we have one question that was sent in through the anonymous form. So most directly geared towards Prabal, it sounds like, but for all of you, kind of, I can get a general version of it too. How different is the research environment in a government institution like NASA as opposed to studying at or staying at some kind of college or whatever? And then for the rest of you, if you can also talk about just how different is the environment in your job, like how interacting with people. Clarissa, you're talking about how you were learning differently, stuff with that.
So I think one of the things that maybe is lost in the kind of like a view of what NASA or other like large research institutions are like is that they do tend to be, with the exception of maybe a couple universities, a lot bigger, and they tend to do a really kind of wide range of topics. So, you know, I can go hang out with a couple of my coworker friends, and one of them will be the Jupiter person. One of them will be a climate scientist who works on like ozone and like things like that. So there are a lot of opportunities, especially about things that you might not have really kind of anticipated before. And there's actually the opportunities to then kind of collaborate and work together. So I think a lot of it is kind of based upon if you're willing to kind of explore outside of your field or even kind of not too far afield, you have a lot of really interesting things that you can start to work on that are maybe not things that you anticipated. On the other hand, I mean, I would say that there's a lot of bureaucracy, but then I think about George Mason and I think about other schools, and I feel like there's a lot of bureaucracy there, and I just don't remember it because it's been a while. But there's certainly a lot of bureaucracy here. There's certain things you can and can't do, and it takes a little time to kind of understand that. So there's definitely an adjustment period. But overall, I think the really nice thing about kind of the ability, it's one of those things where the more independent you are, the more willing you're to go and talk to people kind of in other areas, the more opportunities that kind of open up.
It looks like Cam's joining us right now. Cam, is that you? Yeah, there you are. Hi. You're unmuted. Cam, you're muted.
Am I unmuted now?
Yeah, you're good.
Sweet. How's everybody doing?
Good.
All right. Sorry for being late, guys.
No worries. You let me know so I was aware. So I was. So we already got started. But can you just introduce yourself and give a quick description of what your job is right now and anything about your undergrad experience that's relevant?
Sure. My name's Cameron Woods. I graduated from GMU about, say, 3 years ago. Let's see. Right now, I'm working for the DoD in the S&T department, the Science and Technology. So right now, we're doing research and development. So I'm kind of like doing stuff within the radio end of the spectrum. That's it. I mean, I'm more than happy to answer any questions. I'm sorry, I just came here to whim. What else do you need from me?
And actually, since you also are someone who went back to grad school, like, and you're working at the same time, can you give a perspective about that? That was a question that we had earlier.
Sure, it was a little tough, but luckily GMU has a lot of, most of the courses for the graduate program is night classes. So I went back and forth doing that part-time, maybe 2 classes per semester while working full-time. So at the same time, of course, I don't know if you heard, but I actually have 2 kids as well. So I mean, I was struggling between that, but it's definitely doable. Yeah, no, it was a good time. I mean, I really enjoy the staff and over there, and I enjoy the classes. So I thought, undergraduate was just not enough. I had to take some more classes to kind of really, I just wanted to keep going on with it. So in the meantime, I was still applying. I was applying as an undergraduate. So the whole application process, particularly with the government, you want to jump on that quick, guys, really quick.
Okay. And so then going back to just questions for all of you, what skills were hiring managers particularly interested in from your degree? And are there any skills or experiences you didn't expect to be helpful that were?
My job was very interested in analytical skills and problem solving, because obviously when something does fail, we need to be able to look into the problem, see why, all that kind of stuff. And so, you know, they saw physics and they're like, oh, you know problem solving? And I was like, yes, I do. It's been my last 4 years of my life. I've just been solving problems. And so that was something that they were very interested in. Something that I didn't really expect, and I know that a lot of students in the physics program at GMU, or at least when I was there, a lot of people were in the math and like tutoring center and like had different tutoring gigs that they were doing. And that was something that my job really liked about, or that the people hiring me really liked about me, was that I had a tutoring history, because for them it shows that once you learn everything, you can be someone who will train new people on all of this stuff. And I guess at the time they're having a really hard time getting new people to understand the systems, and so they were really looking for people who could share their knowledge effectively. So that's something too, if anyone has any kind of like tutoring or learning assistant or anything like that, it's actually pretty valuable for companies for different reasons.
Yeah, for me, it was the same. The problem solving skills were the number one thing to this day. It's like the number one useful skill that I gained from my degree. I think even though it doesn't feel like there's anything or any concept that I learned in physics that I've directly applied, having to constantly learn new technical concepts, kind of like putting yourself through that kind of like boot camp where like every semester you're exposing yourself to new ideas and you're pushing up against your wall of understanding and challenging yourself. That kind of like resilience to being exposed to new material and like gaining your confidence and being able to learn new material. That's a skill that has been extremely indispensable. And I think the things that I didn't expect to come into play were actually things I gained through working in retail, like my soft skills. Turns out a lot of engineers are like really bad communicators. So if you're able to get to the heart of the problem and bring a bunch of people in a room together to understand what the goals are and like make sure it's really clear to everyone so they're on the same page, that is extremely useful.
At the risk of sounding like a broken record, problem solving, yeah. To go a little more in detail to make it more, I guess, get a little bit more out of it. Keeping like track of my methods for solving problems and being able to adjust the work that I've done and extension to the job, the analysis that I do based on certain things along the way changing, being able to move between different sets of assumptions. Like when you go from, say, assuming some symmetries in a physics problem to saying, what if we don't have that convenience? How do we adapt there? So something like that, it's easy to keep track of. And the most important thing is, by far, there are a lot of physicists or ex-physicists or physics undergrads who go into data science, data analysis, and a lot of them will be giving you presentations and think they're hot stuff by giving you a tricky question during a little fun quiz round. So you can get a lot of $5 Starbucks gift cards by knowing some esoteric physics things that your coworkers don't know because they don't know the standard model of ground. The presenter thinks they're pretty funny for putting that up there and saying, who knows what this is? So that's easily the most important.
Are these things that typically hiring managers just know because they know to hire physicists, or are these things that you're going to have to basically like make your case for in an interview and a cover letter and whatever?
I did both. I made my case for it, but being on the team I'm on now, I know that they don't always read through the whole resume or cover letter. They'll kind of skim it. So, I mean, for the most part, when they saw physics, they were like, oh, like it just kind of clicked for them because of the STEM field. Another thing that I just thought of for the previous question, if you did poorly in a class, that was actually something that my hiring position liked to see if you retake the class. Like, so if you do poorly in a class and then retake it for a better grade, they love seeing that, because one of the questions we ask all the time is, when was the time that you failed and what did you do about it? Because in this job and in this industry, they recognize like you're not going to succeed 100% of the time, but like if you do hit roadblocks, if you mess up, if you fail, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to quit and like just lose all of your determination to do well and just like start looking for a different job, or are you going to learn from your mistake and come back and do better? And so that was something like, if you did poorly on in a class and retake it, or if you just had any kind of struggles, a lot of places nowadays are starting to see that as a good thing, assuming that you work hard to overcome that issue. So that was something that was unexpected, because I started it by explaining it away, but they literally had a question for me about like, when did you fail? And I was like, let me tell you.
Definitely wasn't something I had to like make a case for, at least in a lot of software engineering interviews. They're going to ask you technical questions. So they kind of just like observe how you think in real time. So they're not really like asking you to like convince them that you know how to problem solve. They'll present you with something, and they definitely are just trying to like kind of get a feel for how your brain works. So yeah, I think that companies that are at least accepting applications from people that have a physics degree do have this expectation that you're probably a pretty good problem solver, and they'll generally throw you some technical questions to see like what you do with it.
A lot of times they can, in my experience, the interviews that I went in, they would sometimes have a couple, not really softball questions, but not really trying to trip you up, just to make sure that you actually get a physics degree, so on and so forth. And then they'll focus on other skills that might not have been covered by the physics degree, such as managing skills, interpersonal communication, things like that. So sometimes it'll be not taken for granted and just assume that you can meet their standards for some things, but verified, and then they can come back and bite you if they decide to focus mainly on areas they think, well, maybe you're not as strong. So that's been my experience.
Yeah, for me, can you guys hear me? Good. Okay, yeah, for me, so going through the hiring process and with hiring managers, most of the hiring managers I've actually interviewed with have no background in physics. So when your application comes in front of them, they think to themselves, "Wow, this is a unicorn. This speaks for itself." So yeah, no. Long story short, they're particularly in the government, we're looking for problem solvers. People that can think on their feet. You'll be probably tasked to do things that you don't want to do. That's the unfortunate thing, at least in the beginning. And then you'll find a way around. But you also know that it won't be the same problem solving that you're hoping for, at least now. So right now I'm not particularly in a lab, but the idea is to get your foot in the door and make your way towards doing some applied stuff. So you'll learn a lot of like other things outside of physics, but you will still be counted upon, particularly with your problem solving skills, and that's what they really care about. But just a bachelor's in physics can get you in the door. You don't need an actual master's or a PhD. It's great, after you get in. Particularly DoD, they'll take care of that for you if that's what you want to do. So if that's the route you want to go, get in, and then they'll take care of your student bills. Yeah, what I'm hoping for. So yeah, lots of interviews that had nothing to do with almost physics.
So what skills did y'all mentioned problem solving as a big thing? Are there any skills that you wish you learned more of an undergrad or things that GMU could have helped prepare you for better?
Software skills. Software skills, that is number one. I mean, like you show up and they ask you about Python, how good are you in Python, particularly Python with the government. So yeah, definitely software skills. Because once you, I'm sure it's been mentioned already, once you go out to the, say, real world, we're all about data science now. So in the government, that's the number one thing, data science, machine learning. So if you, acquire those skills or those tool sets that you learned there at GMU, you just, you apply that to what we're doing out here. And it's not much of a difference, particularly if you know the language. So yes, programming.
I agree. One of the jobs that I was applying for had an hour to do a test on just basic SQL knowledge. So on top of software skills, some Google skills are, those kind of come with your degree for the most part, but like I had an hour and I could use Google. So I ended up scoring pretty high on the test because I knew how to Google things effectively and get through it. I ended up just getting an offer for this job first. But yeah, no, like software skills are huge. They're just becoming so big, and that's, like I said, one of the reasons I wanted to take that break so I could gain some of those skills.
We've got a question in the chat kind of leading off of that. Do they care how much you use Stack Overflow? I know for mine, I use Stack Overflow and Stack Exchange in like all of my research coding, so.
They get worried if you don't use those resources. Like, I'm not even kidding. One, I had a checkout process to like make sure that because we have a basic SQL knowledge thing that we have to pass once you have the job, and I had to check out with one of the developers, and he saw that I was on Stack Exchange, and he was like, yeah, he was impressed that I knew what it was, but he was like, so many people don't use Google for this, and it's expected, and every developer I talk to uses it because, like, even if you know how to code, you can still find really great resources for whatever particular problem you're approaching. So yeah, they actually expect you to use it. They don't care.
Yeah, I'm really involved with interviewing at my company, and we definitely like drill this in for interviewers that like we shouldn't be treating it as some sort of like weird pop quiz where all of the candidates like should somehow know how to answer the question and they only get credit if they figure it out themselves. Because in reality, when you actually have a job and you're at your desk and you need to solve a problem, like you're going to use Google, you're going to go on Stack Overflow, and you don't get any credit in life, at least like out in the industry, for like doing it yourself. So maybe you like want to pat yourself on the back for coming up with the answer, but if you can know how to Google something and you can find the exact answer for the technical problem that you're trying to solve, that is often the right way to approach it. So being able to, I think you said this, Clarissa, being able to Google and like knowing what words and what combination of words will like get you to your answer fastest, that's definitely a skill.
So I think this also I think this probably applies to everyone, but I think another thing I wish I knew was that a lot of collaborative software tools. So for example, being familiar with version control software like GitHub, being able to figure out how to actually, so if you want to share how you're going to do something, writing a Jupyter notebook where it's really easy for somebody to go ahead and use that. But those are things that, they seem really basic, and in a lot of cases they're formalism or whatever else, but they really do help because they kind of help you hit the ground running. In science, that's still not, at least amongst the people I work with, and they're like, a lot of climate scientists use Fortran, which I'm sure. Yeah.
Oh God.
I was just at a science conference. There was a big Fortran Python throwdown in the comments. It was fun. But the thing is, they're programming languages. They're not that hard. You can kind of pick them up. Just go to Stack Exchange, learn the syntax, learn the algorithms. But a lot of that version control software, a lot of those other ways of really communicating about your code and kind of sharing your code and things like that, that's really important. And that does take time. Like you have to watch videos, you have to go read articles about it and things.
So true.
So for those of you who applied to both grad schools and industry positions, how were those two situations different?
So I actually did that, and the interviews were pretty weird. Where I'd go to like an interview for a private thing, and yeah, they'd be like, "How many mailboxes are there in New York City?" And I'd be like, but then and then I'd have the science interviews, which would be really different and more like, I don't know, like kumbaya, like around like the campfire. What do you like doing? Things like that. But I think in both cases they were trying to probe a lot of what everybody here's talked about, which is your analytical skills, but also kind of like for the science was more about kind of vision in the future in terms of kind of plans, not just for the immediate future, but also long term. And I didn't really do too many interviews in private industry, and the ones I did were kind of earlier in the process before I decided to take my position, but they were kind of more focused in assessing skills almost. I don't know if that's true for the rest of you.
For me, it was kind of similar. I felt like for applying to grad school, I felt like just the emphasis of what they were looking for changed a little bit, but they're still looking for, like, after seeing how much the industry really cared about just the skills that you gained and not necessarily just your grades, I kind of used that a little bit more, and I tried to emphasize my skills, especially because in grad school you are expected to do research. And so like all the information in the world isn't going to compensate for the skills that you have to bring to that. So yeah, like I felt like they were looking for the same things, but also I felt like it was a bit more formal applying to grad school. And maybe that might just be me because I have a very chill team. Like one of our interview questions was, what are 3 ways you can use a pencil other than writing? And grad school, like it was just
stab.
pretty much. Yeah. But yeah, so like, but then they were like, but for grad school it's a lot more like, what's your GPA, what are your GRE scores? Like it was a lot more of the formality stuff. And so on my personal like cover letter, I started emphasizing the skills I had a lot more because I felt like being in the industry helped me understand the importance of those. And I got in, so clearly it worked. But yeah, I felt like the little bit different.
Yeah, so for me, after I graduated, I actually took up the first job I could possibly get. And my plan, my hope was obviously to land a government job. So I ended up getting a job at DARPA in the accounting department. So nothing to what I thought I was going to be doing. But I thought by being there, I'd be able to get my foot in the door and would be able to finagle my way around. It didn't quite work that way, but I did get government experience as a contractor. So you also get a clearance, which is really golden if you want to go this route. Meanwhile, I was doing that. I was applying and going to actual hiring events. So you look up for hiring events, and I find those to be a lot better than just applying online, particularly on USA Jobs. And if you guys want to get into deeper talks about that offline, I could definitely try to walk you guys through that as well, because that's a beast in itself. Yeah, I mean, I did a hiring event for the DoD, and it was like a year-long process, and so in the meantime, I was obviously working that, but then I picked up another job doing R&D at DHS, which is cool as a contractor. The whole staff was scientists, physicists and chemists, and I think we had a couple biologists over there. But I was able to gain that type of sector of the work in the government, which is still a lot of acquisition, which is not what I wanted to do. So right now it's still similar to doing that R&D stuff, but hopefully with a foot in the door, you'd be able to make your way around. Yep.
Yeah, we might be emailing you for a purely USA jobs government
Yes.
secret security clearance, because that could take up a whole hour on its own.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like, and I'll give you my card. Probably better offline to do that. And then you can send my email out to anybody, and we can try to, I can the experience. It's been awful. But once you get past it, then it's, it actually does happen. But I mean, I would recommend, honestly, look up hiring events for these agencies, because you're actually doing an in-person interview right there on the spot, and they will actually give you an offer right then and there. So, yeah. And if any pop up, I will actually start sending it your guys' way.
Thank you so much. That will definitely help. So we talked a little bit about interviews. How did you guys prepare for interviews? And were there any kind of things that stood out to you as things that they should be worried about or think about ahead of time?
I went back and reviewed some differential equations, because I thought, you know what, I think I've heard of friends of mine having to do some on the spot DPQ, and it was completely useless for me. I didn't need to do any math outside of like a Ford function calculator, a couple lines of number. One of the things that made me tear my hair out when trying for interviews and deciding what to do is looking at all the list of requirements for every job I was applying for, which was way over 150 jobs, and seeing that there was no feasible way for me to reach proficiency in everything, 50%, 10% of the skills that I needed. So when preparing for interviews, I picked a couple core things to get proficient at and focus on, and not get overwhelmed by all the requirements that were listed for jobs. Not all of them are actually requirements. A lot of them are just things that you'll need to do the job, which you can learn. But this is less individual skills, more how to select the skills that you should focus on. I would do your best to avoid getting overwhelmed by the requirements that you see. Just pick a couple things and build off of there. And in your interviews, you can kind of direct your answers and maybe even lead into questions that are based on what
I think for me, like I said, I went through, Anthem was hiring out of a different agency that brought them contractors, so they knew some of the questions that might be asked. So they gave me some of those questions, but I was still asked questions that like I had no way to prepare for. I think the biggest thing for me was like Andrew said, reviewing the skills that they want for the job. Kind of isolating the ones that you think you like, that you really think you have, and then honestly going back over your cover letter and seeing like how did I sell myself initially, and just like going with that. Like I just think knowing yourself and knowing what you have to bring to the table is really the most important thing in an interview. Because if you can circle back to that, then like that's gonna be, I mean, you are essentially selling yourself to whoever's interviewing you. And I think the last thing was take some time to answer some of the questions. We have so many people that come through now, and I help conduct some of the interviews, and they'll try to give an immediate answer that isn't always the best. And a lot of times I would rather they like take like 10 seconds maybe and think about what they think about it, because we ask about situations in life, and so it's questions that you could understand someone needing to think about for a second. And that's what I did in my interview, and I felt like I was able to give a lot better quality answers than if I just started talking and hoping to kind of hit something in monologue.
Sure. I guess the biggest thing I had to tell you guys is just be yourself, right? Don't get too nervous. Do a little research, on what agency or what company contacts you or invites you for an interview, but don't go into too much depth about it. They know by your skills and in your resume, or your degree that you're good enough to be in the company. You just got to show them that, you're the person they want to work with. Just be yourself. Don't try to be too canned about it. That's all I can say. I mean, that's what works for me. Don't be too boastful either. Don't be too arrogant. I mean, these people, they don't want to work around people like that. So, but be enthusiastic and be willing to learn. And, just throw that out there. Say, I'm willing and open to learn new things. And that will really, really get them going. Just be yourself.
I also think along those lines, and I know it's hard to realize this sometimes when you're in the middle of job applications, things like that. Don't be too hard on yourself if you don't succeed, or if you don't get a particular job. It happens to every single person. You're going to fail repeatedly. I failed repeatedly, like all the time, in embarrassing ways, like fall on my face fail. But it's going to happen. It's not something that says something about you, or says something about you in the future. And having that resiliency is really key, because you're likely to find something that does work out, and it's really then kind of your outlook on that. I think that's important, not just necessarily for interviews, but even tests. I think Clarissa was talking about a class that you failed. I failed. I've had when I had my fellowship applications, I've gotten selected for an NRC too, and I think you can see reviews for it. And if you look at my grades, and you guys can try to guess which class this was, but I got like really
statistical mechanics.
Oh no, I had to do all that, but
oh god.
But in a bunch of I had basically really great grades except for one class where I had I think I failed it, and I think everybody in that class failed it. It just shows up as an F. And when I looked at the reviews, I actually, because I got selected, it was kind of fun to just look at it, and they were like, oh, they have little sections for research, descriptions, and then grades. And on the grades, one of the reviewers is like, applicant has really excellent grades across things, has performed well, except for one F, which must be a really interesting story to hear about. So, I mean, they have to know that this is the type of stuff that can happen, and it's not the end of the world when that happens.
Yeah, I think you've all shared a lot of really good advice. I think that important thing to keep in mind is they are interviewing you to see if this is someone that they want to work with, right? So being pleasant, if you're being asked questions and people are offering you hints or trying to guide your thought, listen to them, right? Because this is an opportunity for them to see what it's like to actually work with you. And if you're argumentative or dismissive of their hints, that does not bode well, because it means that if you had to collaborate on a technical problem in an actual work situation, then you might not be a very pleasant person to actually have to collaborate with. So be mindful about what that's like. I think that when you're really nervous, sometimes you don't realize that your interviewer is trying to help you, but they definitely want you to succeed. And the other thing that I would mention that I don't think a lot of people realize is that at least in the industry, they're very much concerned about whether or not you're going to end up liking the job, and whether or not you're going to be a good fit for the team's culture, and whether or not you're going to end up staying there. And so if you don't seem enthusiastic, or you can't come up with any good reasons if they ask you for why you applied to the job, even if you completely crush the interview, there's a good chance they won't offer you the job, because they're pretty sure you won't keep it. You may come and then leave within a year. So being enthusiastic and actually knowing why you're applying to the job, and maybe only apply to jobs that you're actually interested in, because it makes it much easier that way. I think that's a huge part of it too.
And that brings us to one of the last questions: is how do you know when the job is the right fit for you? And on the flip side, are there any red flags that people should be aware of?
I can handle the red flags pretty quickly. There were multiple companies that reached out to me. One, I don't know their names, so I'll be hesitant to I have that confused with another one, that reached out, wanted to go forward with the interview process. And I thought, great, that's awesome. Looked into them a bit more and did some more research. Saw that they would charge applicants for training, give them a provisional contract for working, and then you would have to work for them for several years for them to reimburse you slowly for that training. And they accept, as you might expect, a lot of applicants to pay them for training and then don't. Predatory employers, keep an eye out for that, and look into look into companies that that do reach out to you, things like that.
So I think one red flag that I experienced was if they almost seem like too eager to hire you. If you don't feel like they really vetted you at all and they give you an offer, I feel like that sometimes speaks to organizational problems where maybe they're having a hard time retaining people. Maybe they've got some management issues. I think that if you don't feel like they've really got to know you at all, but they're still willing to give you a job offer, that should definitely give you pause.
For me, I don't quite say it's a red flag, like I won't take it, but kind of a caution, like something that puts me on caution when I'm looking at jobs, is when the salary or pay is not listed and like they don't give you an answer in the interview. That just always puts me on edge because a lot of times like it's a situation where you might be setting like where they're gonna ask you what kind of pay you're looking for, and so it's just one of those kind of shitty situations, honestly. Because I have heard in some companies that do that, they don't pay everyone equally who's doing the same job. So in my job, like it was very nice to know that there's a structure. It's like you're at this pay for this long. Then if you fit these qualifications, you go up to the next one. If you fit the qualifications, you go up to like the next pay. So that made it so much nicer. And then for the first part of your question, which I think was what were the things that made you feel comfortable? Or
Yeah, how do you know it's a good fit?
okay, yeah. So my team asked me about like hobbies and interests I had, and like Cam said, be yourself. I pretty much admitted I was like, I like anime. And literally like everyone at the table, suddenly the whole interview, like vibe shifted to asking me what I could watch, giving me recommendations for things to start. Like
I want to work with you guys.
right, like it was literally just like
That's awesome.
just to them on that personal level and having that shared interest. Because I was initially not gonna say it, and then I was like, wait, I'm sitting with a bunch of systems analysts. Like these guys are probably nerds. They'll know they'll know what I'm talking about. And so like be yourself. And once I was, and once I like let that out, they like we had connected on a personal level as well. And in my first week on the job, one of the things that was really great was it felt like I was back in the physics study room, the undergrad physics study room, but just with different people. And that was like a really great feeling. So yeah, like for me, it was connecting to everyone who's interviewing me on just a personal level, and then ask them about the manager, the people who run the team, how they feel about them. Because one of the things I got right off the bat was that everybody loved the manager of our team, that didn't try to micromanage anyone. Like she pretty much left everyone alone as long as work was getting done. And that's been true ever since, like asking how they feel and if they're enthusiastic about liking the person in charge of them. That's like a really great thing to see because it means that it's going to be a good environment for you.
Yeah, I think the anime thing is also kind of cool because I think, maybe you started out as like the anime girl then, or something like that. It is kind of distinctive too, hiring and stuff like that. It does, you do kind of remember somebody. They do stand out and they're like, oh, they were also cool for these reasons. I also think you should, I know it's kind of intimidating sometimes to go get interviewed for a position you want, but having questions, asking about kind of the culture there and your work-life balance and things like that you absolutely should ask those. And you shouldn't feel like you're going to get dinged, and it should, if you're going to get dinged and it is something that makes them annoyed, then that probably shows you shouldn't be working there. But asking about, hey, how often do you work? If you're pulling close to a deadline, how often does that happen? How many collaborative things do you do? How many fun things do you do? I know at Goddard and at a lot of, astronomy places, things like that, in a lot of places that when I look for jobs is how often do you collaborate with people who don't work with you? If you, I imagine for industry, if it's kind of like, if you have an interesting idea across something, how much can you learn about some other area? How much can you communicate and kind of, have something where you can have a new line of business or new thing you're developing or something like that. It's important to be able to assess that like how welcoming people are and how creative you can be as well.
I agree. You'll know as soon as you come in. It only takes me about a week or two. I felt that way as soon as I left DARPA. It's fine. I got to interact with accounting people. Fine. I got a job finally doing research and development with scientists. But as soon as you came on board, it was not uptight. Everybody was so like laid back and everybody was joking. It didn't matter what your GS level. That's like in the government, that's your rank. Everybody is just like, colleagues. Everybody's, working together as a team, which was, which is what I came on board for, which is hoping for. So right now, working where I'm at now, I mean, there's not particularly any much technical people that I work with, which is a skill and, that you should try to acquire and, just, I guess, be accepting of people who aren't, scientists, particularly in the government, because you will be working with some of them that have no technical background. They're gonna rely on you. You're gonna have to be patient about that. As long as they accept you, which where I'm at now, they kind of do. It's still, it's not exactly a red flag. I can deal with it because I don't mind the adjustment. You're gonna have to deal with a lot of that when you're working in the government. But once you're in, you're able to, network. Networking is a big thing, by the way. So network your way around, get to know other folks within whatever other company you're at or agency, and you do a good job in your current position, and you will be able to network, and people will be like, oh, that guy's or that woman there, she knows what she's doing, and people will be trying to steal you away from other people. So.
All right, well, thank you, all of you. We're actually running a little bit late, so I'll get to call it here. But thank you, Andrew, Clarissa. Tina had to drop off a little bit ago.
Okay.
Cam. This was really, really helpful. I was hoping we get Patrick Vora in here because we got one question submitted about quantum computing. And so for whoever has that who's watching it later, email him, Patrick Vora, pvora@gmu.edu, or you can email us and we'll direct you to him. He's got a ton of resources for that to help you out.
Sweet. And I'll be talking to you guys about that as well.
Jenna, thank you very much for hosting this. And if anybody wants to ask me questions privately or, about like just science stuff, you can pass my email address on to everyone too.
All right.
You can do the same for mine as well.
Same for me.
All right. Thank you guys very much. I'll put that in the email. All right. Everyone have a nice day.
Bye.